Welcome to our channel. This is Yvonne from Ginger Chick Rehab, and along with my husband Chris, we do thrift flips. We take unwanted, unloved, outdated thrift store finds and then we give them new life. And on our channel, we share the process with you all. So these are some of my thrifted trays that are going to be getting some makeovers. So remember that they were unloved, unwanted items that I found at a thrift store. So I loved running across this set of 3. I'm excited to take that chunky rope off, and they are not real copper, they are painted to look like copper. So this next grouping, and while we're doing metals today, this is some of those little cubbies, some of the things that I can envision putting flowers in and just popping out that detail. They're, yet again, unloved, unwanted items that I am so happy to be flipping today. And a couple of these items already have flowers in them, though they're not the farmhouse flower that I'm looking for, so I am ready to give them 1, a new paint job, and 2, some new flowers. These are just those nice little black accent pieces, but they do need a fresh coat of paint. And for these 3 pieces, especially that cross, I absolutely love flipping crosses. I love giving them a crisp white, and I love to have these tall decor items. Just like these stars, it's just nice when you're layering your decor that you have something with height. So these are some nice found pieces. And I definitely have been having a lot of fun painting florals like these metal ones. I just absolutely love painting the black and getting those petals with just a touch of white, and they've actually been selling really well. So these 3 are resin pieces, and I treat resin just like I treat metal because it's not like wood, it's not going to soak in the paint. And then I always love when I run across a pair of candlesticks, and I'm interested to see if I can get that light bulb out of this lantern to be able to paint it. I don't know if you all think this is a weird grouping, but stars still in my area are selling really well, whether I paint them black or whether I paint them white. So these are some spice bottles that I have collected. I like to have them on hand because when I do a spice rack flip, I like to display them, whether I sell it together or I sell them separately. I don't know why people donate. Some of these are pretty new, some of are IKEA, but I will be painting the lids up black and hoping that they will sell and putting some little labels on the ones that I can. And then I do have this little bottle in this grouping, though I'm excited to get that white to pop. The nice thing about removing stickers and tags off of metal is if you heat the metal up, they will come right off. So sometimes I just do hot water and down dish soap in a sink and then let them soak and they pop right off. But I'm in the workshop, we don't have water, so I'm just going to be using the assistance of the heat gun to remove the labels off these items. When I'm taking this one up, I was like, oh, a 2-for-1. I actually can separate these 2 stars and make them and sell them 2 separately. I love the idea that these ones have some nice texture on them. And then they had been dropped, so their little points on their stars were kind of bent over, so I'm just using these needle nose pliers to straighten them back out. So to clean the metal items today, I am using a hot bucket of water and some super clean. Then the only bad thing about our workshop is we do not have water, so when it comes to a cleaning product in the workshop, we need something that you do not have to rinse off, and super clean and Krud Kutter both are that type of product. So some of these stars were in a bag when I thrifted them, so I did not realize that this one is a paper mache type and that it has been cracked, but I'm not too awfully worried about that. In my arsenal, our supply of products to fix stuff, CA glue is an awesome product to have on hand if you're a flipper. So you just put a little bit of the glue on and then hold it in place, put that dryer in 15 seconds. It dries. As you see, my finger got stuck. But I absolutely love when it comes to flipping items, I can't highly recommend this type of product because while you're assessing everything, if something's a little bit broken, this is a instant fix. While we're fixing little things, this little 3-tier of animals, their little rooster's comb had been broken. So this is an easy fix when it comes to the CA glue. There's a thick, a medium, and a thin, and I'm going to be using the thick. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little dab on it, and then put the sprayer on it, and then let that dry for 15 seconds, and then build it up to what I need it to be. The CA glue is sandable. The longer you let it sit, of course, the harder it is to sand, but I'll be able to fix the comb on the top of this little chicken. Once it's painted up, you won't even know it was broken. And I always remember to put the tip of that CA glue, any type of glue, in a little bit of Vaseline so the lid does not glue on there. So 3 of these stars I didn't need to go in and sand. They have a little bit of texture, but the texture wasn't bothering me. I don't mind the texture, but they have some painted flowers on them. So I'm going to try to get those sanded smooth. And to my surprise, I was actually able to stick my fingers in there and get this light bulb taken out. So when it comes to flipping candlesticks, you want to make sure that you have any of the candle wax off. If the person that had donated these had actually burnt candles on them, you want to make sure that you get that wax removed, and just heating that up and wiping it off is a perfect way to remove wax. So here, this is definitely a closer look into these, what you may have thought were copper trays. They are not. They are just manufactured to look like copper. And something had actually been set in this that looks like it had ate into the metal, and it's raised. So I'm just taking some sandpaper and trying to get that smoothed down. So for this paper mache stars that I'm going to be spray painting, I want to even out their porosity. I don't want that where some of that paper is showing through and some of the paint is showing through. So I'm just going to seal them in with a little bit of the shellac on both sides. And along with that one area where I sanded in the middle of that tray, just to seal that in and hopefully it won't rust through. So for me, prep is definitely a very important part of flipping items. You thrifted them. Sometimes it's a grab and go kind of thrift store find, and then you get them home and you're like, oh, that's got this needs that, this. So now they're in your possession. Yep, you could return them, but a lot of times I find that they are not hard fixes. We are blessed when we built our workshop to be able to attach it to a shed that we use part of it as a spray room. So that's why everything is on a piece of wood, so I can carry it into an area that is ventilated. We specially made this to be able to spray paint in. So here I am using Rust-Oleum paint and primer in the flat black and giving this a nice even coat. You don't want to spray too much, especially on metals. Spray paint likes to run, so you just have to figure out how far it is for you to be away from the item. The closer you are, sometimes it will pool up. But as you get to do these, you will figure out what you need, how you need to tackle each one of these items. And I always like to start where I have them flipped over first, so when I have to flip them back over, I'm not marring up the top of the piece. Well, hopefully I'm not marring up any of the piece. So if you did not notice with the first item, we have our items on a turntable, and then there's some thrifted hockey pucks, and then I set the piece of board on top of that. That way I can get that 360 of turn, and then I'd be able to lift up that board without, well, I'm going to get paint on myself, but without having to be able to get too much paint on ourselves. Luckily, our retail booth, we need to have lots of small items. They are our money maker for us. So that's why I'm always doing these large groupings of smaller items and sharing our process with you all. So on this lantern, it is battery operated, but you do not want to be spray painting directly into where an electric socket or in this case, where the light bulb screws in. So if you do notice, I did stick a little bit of masking tape over that. That was quite a task to try to get my hand in there, so I was not spray painting it. So if you are new to our channel and you're wondering why we are painting everything black, this is our base color. Everything's going to start off with the same base color of this Rust-Oleum paint and primer in black. That's going to cover up any other color that was already on there. And we like to distress our pieces, so whatever the final color is going to be, black is always going to be popping through. And I know there is a wonderful handle that helps you achieve spray painting without hurting your finger, but apparently my finger doesn't ever hurt. So I have one, I never grab it. I guess, like I said, I don't think my finger ever hurts. I guess if it did hurt, I would be grabbing it. So I am testing this out. This is a tray I had in my own stash that I had used for years. So I want to see what this kind of paint job that we're doing is on glass. I can't say that I do a ton of glass, painting a ton of glass. So since it's my own piece, why not give it a try? So now I finally have all those pieces. Thank goodness. You're probably thinking that she didn't show every single piece as she was spray painting it. I get a lot of comments that people like to watch people paint. So I hope that wasn't too much, but I absolutely love the coverage that Rust-Oleum and prepping these pieces. If you prep your pieces right, you should have a nice clean paint job. So I just had to share with you all the way to store polycrylic once you've used a can and started spraying with it, to tip it upside down and make sure that you have wiped off that nozzle head before storing it. It always gets that little gump up of spray paint on it, and then before using it again, make sure that that is all nice and clear. Don't ask me why tipping it upside down helps. This is something I researched because us too, we were getting those splits and splatters onto our product. And I absolutely love spraying it from a spray can, especially on items like this because of its smooth mist coverage. But what I'm doing here is I'm sealing that Rust-Oleum paint and primer is a wonderful product, but that does not have a top coat. So this is a top coat to seal that paint onto these pieces. And then I'll also share this with you. Do not tip your can upside down when you're spray painting, or you will get the same thing. For whatever reason, it will give you those bits and splatters of the polycrylic on there. So you need to keep this can upright. It's just one of those products. Just wanted to give you a close-up view of how we fix that little comb on that chicken. After that polycrylic is dry, about an hour or so, that's another reason I like the polycrylic, the dry time of it. I can flip these pieces over and now do the complete same thing where I'm spraying whatever area is left with the Rust-Oleum paint and primer in the black, waiting for that to dry. The nice thing about a flat is you can tell it's dry because it won't be shiny anymore, and then sealing that in yet again with the polycrylic. So after letting that cure overnight, making sure that spray paint and that polycrylic is good and dry, I'm now moving on to painting a few of these items with the Waverly chalk paint in white. And I'm kind of doing my version of enamelware, where I'm leaving some of the black trim pieces and painting some of it white. So I have to say I had this little fan brush, somebody called it on one of my comments. I didn't know what it was called. I picked these up at the Five Below store. I wish I could just buy just this fan brush. I absolutely love painting with this on that chalk paint. So that Waverly chalk paint in white does need to be watered down just a little bit. It's a thick paint. I like a smooth finish, but what I like about this brush is the bristles are nice and soft, so they are very smooth when I'm painting it on. And on these trays, they have that little rolled lip. That's why I say that enamelware, because that enamelware a lot of times has that little rolled black detail. And I love how this almost fits right underneath there. And I have to say, I am excited to find trays that I can do this technique out, because they have all sold. As soon as I paint them up, they have sold. So yeah, you're going to keep on making what is selling. So on these trays, they have that double handle where they had that big chunky rope tied to it. I cut that off. That was not my vision, but I do have to go in and do a little bitty detail brush around the handle. The fan brush is way too big. So usually when it comes to painting white, it's 2-3 coats, and probably a little bit extra when it comes around to your handles. I don't want to put a lot of paint on because I don't want it to have to try to sand it off when it drips and runs. Now for this piece, I'm just going to be leaving that big chunky outer edge black. So I'm going to paint the middle white and that bottom leg part white. So for pieces like this cross, I do have to go in with a little bitty brush, the fan brush. If you have a bigger chalk paint brush, I guess you could get in there. I don't like anything to pool, so I don't mind taking the brush and going in all those little holes and making sure that it's covered. So for the flower pieces, all I'm doing is taking that fan brush with not very much paint on it at all, and then just running it down, just catching the tips of each one of those flower petals. And I will say that chalk paint dries nice and fast, so by the time I had that first piece done and to the last piece that I just finished up, that first piece is dry and I can start on to my second coat. And I do find that the Waverly paint usually covers in about 2 coats, but I do go over one more time just to make sure that it's the coverage that I'm looking for if I need any spots on a 3rd coat. So now that I have finished painting everything, and I have found that it is best as soon as you're done painting to start distressing as soon as they are dry. So I just take a piece of drop cloth that I have cut up, hot water, and then I just start rubbing on the piece and getting it to distress where I want it to be. If it takes a little bit more time than I want for it to distress, I don't want that water sitting on there too long that it's taking the areas off that I don't want. I do go in with a little bit of very used sandpaper that we kind of hoard on for just this occasion, and use the assistance of that to help get those parts just moving a little bit more. So I find when it comes to the water distressing, I just wet the piece down, use a little bit of that sandpaper, get that moving, use the rag again, get that paint off there. I don't want to be soaking the whole paint because the chalk paint is made to be removed with water, so I want to make sure that I get this process going a little bit faster, that I'm not taking it off where I don't want it to come off. And though on the top of this piece, I'm not wetting it down to distress it, I'm just wetting it down to make it nice and smooth. It's just a texture that I'm looking for on our pieces. So yep, I just go and wet it down a little bit, take a little bit of that sandpaper, yet again, not to show the black through, I just want to make it smooth. So on this piece, I need to go in and make sure, I don't know if you noticed when I showed it, it has bees on it. Not only does it have floral, I'm not usually too worried about picking out an individual item on a piece when I'm distressing it, but I know that I want it to be apparent that there are bees on this. So as I'm watering this down and sanding it, I need to find those areas where those little bees are, so I can make sure that they're showing through with that distressing. So anywhere that there's a raised edge on any of these metal pieces, that's where I'm going to be trying to show some of that black underneath, where I'm going to go along and distress it. Yep, this is why I said it's my version of enamelware. Enamelware, I know, is usually just a little bit of the detail of the black, and then the inside should be white, but I've already painted it black and it's there to stay. So this is why I say it's just my version. So after getting everything water distressed and sanded the way that I was pleasing to my eye, I do probably have a little bit of areas that I need to go back in with. It's kind of hard to hit that little round edge when you're using the white. So the nice thing about it is the Waverly and ink chalk paint matches up with the Rust-Oleum spray paint very well. I know not all blacks are created equal, not all whites are created equal, so it's just nice that this Waverly ink paint matches. Somebody asked me if it matched the black onyx that we used. I haven't had an opportunity to need to use it yet, so I cannot answer that. Then I do go back through wherever I touched with the Waverly ink paint. I do go over with a little bit of polycrylic to get that sealed in before moving on to my next step of waxing. Because if I would wax where that black chalk paint wasn't sealed in, I would have gray all over my white. So when you're using chalk paint is made to, you need to seal it in. So for the way that I like to seal it in, I like to use this Varathane finishing wax in the natural. It doesn't seem to be a product that rubs off more of that chalk paint. It seems to do what it's supposed to do and seal that paint in. I've already distressed it where I want it to be. I don't want a product that's going to be removing more of it. Now that I've finished up with my white items, I have these few items that I envision to have some textured gray, almost a cement looking finish to them. And these are the items. So I'm going to be using the Waverly Elephant chalk paint, a little bit of baking soda, a little bit of water to give these some texture. So it's equal parts baking soda to equal parts of whatever paint that you're using. I'm using chalk paint. I believe you can use whatever paint you'd like. And I'm just using another one of those brushes, the paint brushes that have those white bristles that I got at Walmart. I just love these. Yes, I want it to be textured, but I don't want it to be overly textured. So, yep, these were the same thing. They got spray painted with Rust-Oleum. They got sealed in with the polycrylic. So then they're all ready. And I noticed that prepping them before doing this kind of a texture on them definitely helps that paint, this textured paint, adhere a lot better to them. So I do have to go in with a little bittier brush to get the underbellies of all these animals that are stacked on top of each other. Not the easiest of tasks, but just something that's got to be done. So I paint up and sell. We sell a lot of candlesticks, just painting them white, painting them black, some wooden ones, but I kind of thought, why not give this a try with some textured kind of, I don't know, we'll see how they sell. They were a matching set. It's just fun to change it up. Don't you all think it's fun to change it up a little bit? Give somebody something a little bit more unexpected. So I wondered how many people were going to be sad that I was painting this two-tier tray up already, this metal. It was that silvery in color, but I will tell you, it was all scratched up, so I was not sad at all painting it. Just the texture of the beads is what drawed me into doing this texture paint on it. Nope, I'm not really positive how it's going to turn out because I've never done this technique on something like this. But like I said, those little balls on that are around there, they just have that little bit of an unevenness of that texture. So I'm excited to see how this turns out. Along with this metal tray, I know when I showed it in my thrift haul, I definitely called it Vikingish. So that texture on there, yet again, that is another thing that drew me to doing this textured cement type of look on it. This is my second coat. So my first coat, I did a lot of texture with the baking soda. And so my second coat, I'm going in, I'm using the same bowl, but I just poured out some of the elephant in there. I'm not worried about getting it overly textured. I feel like these had enough texture with that first coat. So the second coat, I am just doing just the elephant paint itself. So now that paint is dry, I'm going in with the Waverly wax in white, and I'm using a waxing brush. So this is textured. You definitely want to use the waxing brush. So I'm just taking that white wax, I'm just rubbing it on, using that brush, getting it into all that texture that I made with that baking soda and elephant paint. And then I'll just be taking a piece of drop cloth and wiping any excess off. I want it to have a very textured look, a very cement-like look. And then I'm going to be doing that white wax. It's really hard for me to say on all these pieces to give them that cement look. So wiping that on with that brush, taking that piece of dry cloth and rubbing it off. And I don't even mind as I'm doing this, some of that black is peeking through. I actually love it even more that some of that black is peeking through. So for this tier tray, I did have to go in with a little bit of your brush to get that into this drop down part and around those little bitty beads. That's where I really want the accent of the white wax to stay in. But I have to say, I am loving how this is turning out. So I have sealed in some crocks that I have done with this texture paint using this clear coat by Rust-Oleum. So that is what I'm going to be sealing these in with. Yep, you can spray this right over that wax after that had cured. I let them sit up overnight. And just to make sure that that wax and all this stuff is not going to come off, since I'm reselling this, I want to make sure that product is on there to stay. And then to seal this paint on these flowers that I had painted, I'm just going back to that polycrylic spray. I only have one can of the Rust-Oleum and multiple cans of this polycrylic. For this little glass jar, I want that white detail to pop. So I'm just putting a little bit of this black onyx paint, just a couple little dollops, just enough to be able to spread it around and then let it dry overnight. So to finish up that glass tray, that piece of glass that had those cherries on it, I spray painted it black, sealed it in with polycrylic, but I want to put a little bit of detail on it. So I chose this tile, this mosaic tile, and this is definitely one of those that it took a while to cut and a while to weed, but I'm actually cutting it out on cardstock so I can do it as a reusable stencil, hopefully. So we will see how it goes. Can't even tell you the excitement when all the parts that I needed to weed out stayed on the mat. This is why I cut out two, so I could cut one up and use most of the full one, just what was pleasing to my eye. So I'm not going to tape these down. I painted on glass. I'm a little bit nervous of having something sticky. That's why I didn't use the vinyl that I normally use for my stencils, that I use this cardstock. So I'm going to put a little bit of baking soda in with this Waverly white chalk paint, because I really want it to make sure that it's going to stick and adhere well. So I probably needed some type of a different kind of a stencil brush, but I did not have one, so I'm using the makeup sponge that I normally use for my stencils. I have to say it was a little bit harder to use because this is very thick cardstock that I cut these out with, and I could not tape this one down. Like I said, I was a little bit nervous to tape on that glass until I felt like it had cured long enough. So I'm just going in really gingerly, a little bit of paint. This is not one of those stencils that I'm going to be able to go over multiple times to get the white to be even whiter. So this is one of those, it's the love of what you're doing, and I do love what I'm doing. So I will just go in gingerly and hit all those little spots, trying to make sure that the paint is getting in all those little bitty holes. So after sealing that in with the polycrylic and letting that dry, I'm finishing up with just adding a little bit of this Waverly antiquing wax. I do from afar love the whiteness of this piece against the black, but once you hold that up close, you will see that it's not as crisp because I could not go over it multiple times, and putting a little bit of that Waverly antiquing wax on there just makes it seem a little bit more finished. So my Viking tray became my problem child of the group. So after a night of sitting, all this happened. Though I kind of like that look. That almost reminds me of doing a rust job on it, but that was not the look I was going for. So I'm going to have to seal this in with a couple coats of shellac and do the painting process all over. But there's always got to be one child in the group, and I guess since I gave him the Viking name, I guess that's why he had to stand out. So I have a few containers that need some greenery in them. I guess they don't need, but I'd like to put some greenery in there. So I'm starting right off with the Dollar Tree floral foam. Yes, I did buy 12 of it and had a whole box. I do go through a lot of it. And this is that Spanish moss, that dried grass that Dollar Tree also offers. So I'm going to be doing Walmart's lavender in these containers, just layering it till it's pleasing to my eye. I have that taller one from Walmart and the shorter one from Walmart. If you want more of a detailed, I can link and throw a card up during this. So if you want more of a detail of how I layer my greenery in, I always suggest a good pair of nippers to cut down that wire. And I just like to start off with a center long one and then work my way out. This file envelope, I painted it all up, but it's way too big and not cost efficient at all to put any type of greenery in it. And I thought it was just a little bit plain, and I didn't really want to try to cut letters so tiny to fit into that label. So I'm actually using these letters that I got from Amazon. I'm still looking for numbers that match them, but I just had the letters, so I'm going to do farm on the top and house on the bottom. Then I toyed with how to finish this riser off, and I'm in love with that little bee from I See Paris stamp set. So that is actually all I'm going to do. I'm going to stick that little bee in the corner using some of the Stays On ink. Then I will seal that in. I'll seal both of these in with the Rust-Oleum clear coat, and then after that dries, finish them up with some Varathane wax just to make sure that everything's sealed in and protected. But I just love this little bee. So I thank you so much for watching today's video, and what was your favorite? And did we inspire you in any way to look at thrift store finds in a new way? I thank you so much for watching today's video, and if you were part of our YouTube family, thank you so much. And if you're new to our channel and checking out the content for the first time, please consider hitting that subscription button along with the notification bell. Thanks again for watching.